Hi everyone, we will be starting. We're just going to give another couple of minutes for more people to be joining us, and we'll start at about 2 minutes past. Okay, so that's 2 minutes past, so we will get started. We've only got an hour and a lot to talk about. So firstly, to say thanks for joining the session today and welcome to you all for joining. My name is Shelley Allen and I'm the Head of Open Research here at Emerald. I'll be chairing our discussion today. We have some super panelists with us and I'll quickly introduce them so you can put names to faces. So with me today, we have Dr. Dany Kingsley. Dany is a thought leader in the international scholarly communication space. She is Associate Librarian of Content and Digital Library Strategy at Flinders University and Visiting Fellow at the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science. Between 2015 and 2019, Dany worked as a Deputy Director of Cambridge University Libraries, Scholarly Communication and Research Services. She established the Australasian Open Access Strategy Group and worked at the Australian National University as Manager of Scholarly Communication after completing her 2008 PhD there on open access. She is in demand as a presenter and writer, so I'm really pleased that she's agreed to speak with us today. Following Dany will be Dr. Sumit Narula. Sumit is presently Deputy Dean of Research at Amity University, Gwailor in India. He is also the Director and Head of Institution in Amity School of Communication. He's got 2 masters and 2 postgraduate diplomas to his credit, published 2 books in mass communication and journalism, and edited 7 books. Sumit is also the Editor-in-Chief of the biannual Scopus Index Platinum OA journal named Journal of Content, Community and Communication. He is also the chairman of the recently established Centre of Excellence for Detection of Fake News and Dissemination at AUMP. He's developed a course on spotting predatory journals with Taylor's University, Malaysia, and he's also spoken about academic integrity on various platforms. We'll then finally also hear from Nick Sheppard, who is Open Research Advisor at University of Leeds in the UK. His journey into open started at one of Leeds' other universities in 2007, what was then Leeds Metropolitan and is now Leeds Beckett University, setting up an institutional repository to support green open access. Nick moved down the road to the University of Leeds in 2016, initially to join the research data management team, and now works across research support services in the library, promoting an holistic approach to open research. But to kick us off, I'm just going to share my screen and then I'll briefly share with you some information about Emerald and our Time for Change survey. So let's see if this goes smoothly. Okay, can I confirm that you can see my screen? Yeah, great. Okay, so right, so I'm going to kick things off with a brief look at our Time for Change report that we released earlier this week. If you're not familiar with Emerald, we're a mid-sized publisher of the applied social sciences, but we like to think that we punch well above our weight. Our mission is to support real impact through an equitable, sustainable community underpinned by healthy practices. And we're proud to boast a diverse authorship with voices from both academia and practice, as well as a disproportionate amount of content from developing regions and in support of the SDGs compared to many of the larger publishers. There's no doubt that the global pandemic has shone a light on the advantages of open and showcased the benefits of open research practices, but it's also exacerbated inequality, led to further polarisation of views. And I don't know about anyone else, even though I'm someone who tends to embrace change, there is a part of me that would quite welcome a bit of stability right now. Whether we'll get it or not, I think, is another matter. But now in its third year, Emerald's Time for Change report in 2021 explores the challenges within academic culture and gauges interest for change. By reporting academics' views and lived experiences, we're aiming to create momentum towards a fairer and more inclusive environment where impactful research can thrive. The report is based on the findings of the Global Survey of Literati that we conducted during July and August in 2021, and a total of 2,128 academics participated. A new theme introduced this year was on the widening inequalities within academia. And we'll post a link to the full report in the chat, but I'll just touch on some of the results that struck me when I was reading it. So there's really a lot to unpack in the report, so I do encourage you to read it in full, but some of the notable highlights for me were that there really is still anxiety among researchers about making their data openly available. The main concerns are around sensitivity of data, particularly for research involving personal data, and also reuse or misuse of that data. It's also clear that researchers don't feel particularly supported to make their research data available. So either by publishers, they don't feel rewarded by their institutions, and that the culture seems to be more competitive instead of collaborative, which would perhaps be needed to move the needle here. There's a very strong preference still for double-blind peer review as the most effective form of peer review, showing that among at least our communities, the traditional approach to vetting research findings is quite entrenched, and this does seem to sit out of kilter with some of the calls for transparency in general that we see in other parts of the ecosystem. So that's obviously a bit of a barrier and something that we'll need to work through. We also asked people about preprints, and I was actually surprised to learn that the understanding of what preprints are actually it remains relatively low among our community. I thought the pandemic would have accelerated understanding there, but not so much, it seems. Of those that did understand it, there's concerns about quality, wrong information getting into the public, and also seems to be some links to worries around open peer review as well. Speed of dissemination, however, was seen as a major benefit. So not on these slides as well, but in addition, some of the responses that we saw expressed significant inequalities that are barriers to open publishing. Those included language barriers, funding barriers, either for APCs or for the research itself, and there is still a digital divide. And the other key point that struck me when I was looking at the report was that in many areas around open, we saw a big increase in awareness and willingness to be open between 2019 and 2020. So we jumped from the low 20s to over 50% of people saying they were willing to publish openly. It's actually hovered at around 47% this year, which makes me wonder, with all the ways the pandemic has shown the benefits of open, have the inequalities that it's been exacerbated, are they creating some kind of stagnation in progress? Are people is open falling down their priority list? Have we seen progress stall a little? Hopefully not, it's only 1 year, but I thought that was interesting when we saw the progress from the previous year. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then we'll hear from our speakers. But before we do that, we just want to do a really quick poll of our attendees just to find out your views on what I was presenting there. So in your opinion, is the Academy ready for an open world? I hope you can see that poll there and can just click yes or no. Highly scientific poll, as I'm sure you'll agree.
Can you see those results, Shelley?
I cannot see the results, I'm afraid, Ben. Can you see them? Can you let us know what happened there?
Yeah, so we seem to be settling on about 67% yes and 33% no.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of optimism in the room, which is fantastic. So I've stopped sharing my screen. Is that correct? And we can see all the panelists. Just want to double check that. Yeah, great.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so actually it sounds like there is a lot of optimism around this, which is really good to see, and hopefully we can have a discussion about some of those barriers and what we can do to start to change things and move things in the direction we want. So Dany, if we can start with you, how surprised or otherwise were you by that incredibly scientific poll, and what's your own personal experience?
Well, when I saw the poll, when we chatted before today, I was thinking maybe we needed a third option, which was it's complicated. I wonder if we'd had that option, how many people would have voted for that? But one of my questions is, of course, what do we mean by academy? Do we mean people, individuals, or do we mean organisations? But regardless, I should acknowledge first that I'm coming and speaking to you from the lands of the Kaurna people, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hello, and I'm from Australia, and I'm talking from Australia in the evening, so hello to all of those people in the different time zones out there. And just to take, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our perspective from down under, and I have then also worked in the UK for a few years and then come back, so I've kind of straddled the two hemispheres in this open space. And I came into this space in Australia in the early 2000s, when Australia was very much at the forefront of a lot of the activities that were happening in the open space, because there was a lot of government investment in infrastructure and repository development. And we had the very first in the world national digital thesis program. We had the first Open Repositories Conference was held in the University of Sydney. The first institutional open access policy was here at Queensland University of Technology. And there was a lot of positivity towards the Green First agenda and lots of open discussions. Now, I've come back after 5 years or so of being overseas, and what I'm seeing is a lot of good pockets of activity and lots of enthusiasm, but that collective vision is missing. That was here, is not here anymore. And one of the things I just recently done is a study of open access policies of Australian universities. And what we found in this study was that less than half of the Australian universities have an open access policy at all. And those that do show very little consistency on a lot of the decisions around, do they support green or do they support a gold open access? Do they provide funding for it? Do they support hybrid or not? What is the purpose of the policy? But what was most surprising at all is there's no consistency on even what they define open access to be. So we are a very long way from a sort of collective voice on that. I am going to, once I stop talking, put some of the links of what I'm talking about into the chat, so they will be available to you as well. So that theme of us needing to align our policies and positions of activity across the country is reflected in the data space as well. I've just written, co-authored a big report for the Australian Academy of Sciences on advancing data-intensive research in Australia, and I wrote the policy chapter, and that had the same problem with data, that the policies running from the funders through to government policy, through to university policies are all inconsistent in what they're asking for, and they don't have any teeth, which is a problem. We do have a new chief scientist this year in the first of her 3 years of office, and she's identified open access as one of her priorities. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see how that plays out. But we're still in that early stages of that sort of process. And what's been happening just recently is the collective consortia have negotiated some new read and publish deals here in Australia. This is quite new, this type of negotiation and in interaction with publishers. So that's going to open up some interesting conversations, I think, here, because the sort of information and issues that were being raised and discussed in the UK as a result of all of the changes and the ways we had to interact with the publishers just haven't occurred here. And so this is going to be a trigger point for that. So I think that things will change. And I hope they do, because you may or may not be aware that we recently hit the headlines, the Australian Research Council, which is one of only 2 research councils in Australia, because one of their early career fellowships programs, they had decided to reject any application that mentioned preprints. Not just cited them, actually mentioned them at all. And the problem with this was, one, that rule was ridiculous, but secondly, that our colleagues in the research offices didn't even understand that would be an issue or was out of keeping until some of these applications got rejected. And so there was this retrospective cry of outrage, which should have been cut off at the pass. The good thing about that is it started opening up some conversations, so that's what we need to be doing. One of the things you asked me to talk about, Shelley, was one of the sort of positives, and I think or what can we do to improve? And I think the main improvements we could make in Australia is a consistency of approach that's clearly needed, and also I think a willingness to acknowledge failure and learn from it, rather than pretending that everything's fine all the time. And I think there's a bit of a tendency to do that, which is not helpful in the long run. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dany. I think there's a lot to unpick there, but before we dive in, if we can hear from you, Sumit, I think you have some slides to share, so Ben will make you presenter, and then we can hear from you.
I hope you can see my screen. So is it clear, ma'am?
Yeah, we can see.
So yes, India, we are getting ready for open access. I have a couple of documents. We have a draft SITP documents where the Indian government is speaking about one nation, one subscription, and it reads, the government of India will negotiate with general publishers for one nation, one subscription policy, where in return for one centrally negotiated payment, all individuals in India will have access to journal articles. This will replace individual journal subscription. So I will be putting this document for everybody to read, that how this India is opening up for open access, and we are very, very keen. And being the editor-in-chief of a Platinum Open Access journal itself with me, I can discuss the problems that we are facing in running an open access journal. And the main thing that I will be discussing today will be to be going to the dark side of the open access, where the open access has been made a predatory kind of thing. Everybody says that if it is an open access journal, it's a predatory journal. So it's not like that. Not all the open access journals are predatory. So a couple of journals are there which have turned predatory, and they have misused the concept of open access. So I will be just going live, and I will be show you 4 journals which are still existing, and they are in various databases, but they are open access. They are taking money from the people from the point of view of APC or something like that, like the open access or not. But at the end of the day, these journals are predatory. So 2 or 3 live examples, which will just show you the dark side of open access problem here in India and the Asian countries. The first journal which I will be showing you is European Journal of Molecular and Clinical Medicine. So what now these kind of journals do, they will never give you the details of the contact. We don't know who is the editor and who is running this journal. So if you go, the website is an original website. If you go to the details of contact us, there will be nothing there. Only this misinformation. I rather said disinformation. When you go to the journal info, you click on the editorial board, again there will be disinformation. So there are no pictures. The email IDs have made by themselves only, and the people whose name have been used here, they do not know that their names have been used here. And how we can say that it's a predatory journal? First, it is publishing also out of the purview of the research journal. So its purview is molecular and clinical medicine, and the paper should also belong to molecular and clinical medicine. You can have an interdisciplinary journal, but you cannot have a multidisciplinary journal. This journal cannot have multidisciplinary papers. We will check the area of this journal from the Scopus databases where it was enrolled before getting delisted. So this journal is now delisted, but we will see that what was the area in which this journal can publish. So we'll go to the sources. I think everybody has the access to the Scopus databases. They can check it on their own. So what we will do, I'll just have to sign in again. It logged out because of 15 minutes of inactivity. So I'm signing again. And then I'll just give a simple exercise, and then you will see that how they're misusing the concept of an open access, which is a very, very beautiful concept of giving science to all for free, but they're misusing it. So European Journal of Molecular and Clinical Medicine. So this is the journal. This is the information. You can see open access written here. So it is an open access journal. So when you click and you deep dive into it, you dig more about it, you will see the area also. So you can see the coverage has been discontinued. It's not there in now Scopus databases, but just look at the area. Subject area was immunology, microbiology, and related things, because the name of the journal is that. But if you go to the website, and here, if you type Bombay Stock Exchange and go to search, you will see the papers. It will just come out, the papers of Bombay Stock Exchange. These paper, the title of these papers and the papers does not belong to the research journal, but they're publishing it. So at the end of the day, the concept of open access has been misused by a journal, which was eventually was in the Scopus databases, but now has been removed because of this thing, because of the predatory thing. So just look at these titles. These titles does not belong to this journal, but they are published by this journal. So they got caught. Now the journal is removed, but the papers are still there. And they have misused the concept of open access. They published around 3,000 research papers, and they took a lot of money from these 3,000 people. But now all these 3,000 papers have been removed. If you go to the content coverage, the papers have been removed. Another example where this concept, beautiful concept of open access, has been misused by this journal, Journal of Critical Reviews. This is a Malaysian journal. This journal also misused the concept, and on the website it said that it will take the papers from all the areas, but eventually it is also a science journal, and it cannot take the papers from out of the purview. But again, it published. Now this journal also got delisted. And if you see the details on the Scopus databases, again you will see that it is an open access journal, and they misuse the concept of open access, where you have to pay the APC. On the pretext of APC, paying APC, they will ask you to pay them some money. And once you pay them some money, then you come and realize that this is a bad journal or predatory journal. Again, the problem, if you go to contact, there are no details of this journal. You just cannot know who the editor is and who is running this journal. You can see these details. And if again you go to the editorial board, again there will be error that they will not give you the original names, which other big journals with big publishers are giving. They are doing everything in black and white. Couple of good journals, like I'll show you an Emerald Journal, which is an open access journal, Asia Pacific Journal, or International Journal of Climate Change Strategies. On the front page, you will see that it is a gold open access journal, and on the upfront, it's written that there will be an APC charged after accepting the paper. So here it is. So this is a gold open access model, and in Emerald we have also platinum open access model. So DOAJ also covers that. Directory of Open Access also covers that, which journal has an open access policy, which journal is going for the APC, which journal is going without the APC. But the main concern for me as a researcher in India is that open access is coming to India, but at the end they are also being misconcepted and misused by these predatory journals. And there are many more examples. I think I'll come back to this again if I get more time, but over to you, Shelley, ma'am.
Thanks, Sumit, and thanks for the shout out for our climate change journal. That was in fact our first flip to open, and we're very proud of that journal, so thank you. So over to Nick now. So we'll make you the presenter, Nick, and if we could just hear from you, from your experience of change within the academy, either personally or as an institution, that would be great. I can see your screen.
My screen, but what can you see? Can you see my slide?
Yeah, I can see your intro slide. Is the academy ready for the open world? Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
So thank you for the invitation to talk today. It was interesting, listening back to that intro from Shelley, to realise I've been working in this area now for nearly 15 years. I think you could learn to be an astronaut or a brain surgeon or something that time, or an astronaut and a brain surgeon, but instead I'm still sort of trying to get to grips with open access and open research. Try and give you perhaps a bit of perspective from an institutional perspective, give a few facts and figures about the University of Leeds for those that might not be familiar perhaps with the UK or with Leeds. It's one of the bigger universities in the UK, 38,000 students, of which 10,000 are postgrads, 12,000 international students, and over 9,000 staff. It's a member of the Russell Group, research intensive universities in the UK. While Leeds itself actually has 5 universities. So in addition to the University of Leeds, there's Leeds Beckett University, Leeds Trinity University, Leeds Arts University, and the University of Law. So there's lots of students, lots of academics, lots of research happening in Leeds. So again, as Shelley said at the beginning, my personal journey started up the road, and you might be able to see actually the big building, if I'm not sure where my camera is Leeds Beckett, which was Leeds Metropolitan University. So that's where I started in 2007. And that was on a repository startup project. At the time, an organisation called JISC was investing a lot of money into institutional repositories to support green open access. And I think we were beneficiaries at Leeds Met, as was of the second tranche of funding. So University of Leeds, where I am now, already had their repository, I think, as a research intensive. Leeds Metropolitan was more of a teaching focused university, and we were, I think, part of the second tranche of that funding. And since then, open access in the UK has been driven by the Research Excellence Framework, or the REF, as we affectionately know it in the UK. I'm sure any UK colleagues, and Dany will share the affection for the REF, which is the regular research assessment exercise that gauges the quality of research and on which basis the funds are allocated. And as part of that process, for the most recent REF exercise, which has just happened in 2021, delayed from 2020 due to COVID, it was mandated, a policy came out in 2016 that all research had to be open access. So that's really driven the open access agenda in the UK. So all universities in the UK will certainly have an open access policy, which will be focused on the REF requirements. We don't actually know what the next REF requirements will be. As I say, we've just submitted to the last REF, but we can be sure that open access and open research, I think, will be part of that. In addition to open access, most universities, well, all universities again, will have a policy on research data management, which again is recognised by the REF, but we don't quite have the same mandate. So the REF does recognise the value of open and fair data. Perhaps we can talk a little bit today about fair data, so data that can't necessarily be open in the social sciences, etc., but it still needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And that complexity perhaps is one of the issues that we don't quite have the same mandate around this at the moment. But going back to 2007 at Leeds Met, as was, at that time we weren't thinking about research data really. It was all about green open access and learning objects actually at that time as a teaching institution, but we weren't really thinking about research data, nor were we really thinking about the more granular outputs and activities throughout the research life cycle that I would now term open research. So in addition to research data, software and code, and then activities through the life cycle like preprints and pre-registration, protocols, methodology, really trying to share the full range of materials throughout the research process. So before hopefully we have a discussion, I'll just show you some examples of a new breed of policy that's started to emerge in the UK. Now, as I say, all universities very much will have an open access policy and research data management policy, but what we start to see now is these university formal position statements on open research. At my last count, I'm collating these. In fact, I'll just, if you want to actually see these things, I'm collating these on a blog post. Hopefully that's it. So they actually link through to the actual statements at these individual universities. The first one, and to get one, was the University of Reading. Closely followed by the University of Cambridge. You'll see I bumped it up to second, Dany. It was third on the list when we spoke the other day, but you pointed out that you were actually the second university. I think you perhaps had some involvement in writing that, so perhaps can talk about that. You'll notice that actually Leeds isn't actually yet on that list. It's an area that we're looking at in a, this only represents perhaps 10% of universities. We do have, as many universities do, information on open research practice, but we don't yet have a formal position statement. Most universities in the UK talk about open research as opposed to open science, just to be a bit more inclusive of the humanities, etc. UCL actually talks about open science and scholarship, and I think Oxford talks about open scholarship as well, although they may have changed that. I know the University of Aston University is also developing one as well. The box on the right-hand side there, I've been looking quite closely at these things because obviously we're, hoping to develop a policy of our own, and there's a lot of activity within my own university. So I've been sort of looking at them and the types of issues that are covered in them. So they all talk about a definition of open research. Some of the stuff I've just been talking about in terms of sharing the granular outputs of the research process. Lots of stuff on benefits of open research, both for institutions, for science and for individuals. A lot of emphasis on reproducibility and research integrity. There's been a lot of emphasis on that over the past few years as well, starting I think with psychology, the recognition that a lot of research can't necessarily be reproduced, even by the researchers that undertake it initially, and sharing the full range of research outputs is a big part of that. A lot of stuff about disciplinary differences, and again, that's perhaps something we can talk about. That's a real challenge for someone like myself in a centralised service in a big research-intensive university. I don't know my electron microscopes from my French history necessarily, but we're obviously, as a central service, we're trying to support a wide range of different disciplines with different approaches and different issues. They tend to cover practical advice. There's a lot of stuff on policy and future plans, and we're doing a lot of work here at Leeds around that as well, and an awful lot of emphasis as well, which I think the sector really does need to think about, is culture and reward and incentive. Historically we've been focused on the journal impact factor and getting publications in Nature and the big journals, and increasingly I think we need to start thinking about how we actually incentivize this type of behaviour for more positive scientific culture. So I'll stop there. I'm aware of the time, but just to flag up a couple of other initiatives that may be of interest that are mentioned in the blog post I've just posted. There's the UK Reproducibility Network. So this is a grassroots initiative initially out of the University of Bristol that a lot of universities are now exploring the issues about reproducibility in different disciplines. And DORA, people may be aware of the Declaration on Research Assessment, which is looking at responsible research assessment. So trying to get away from journal impact factor and that kind of thing. And there's interesting intersections there, I think, about inclusive research and trying to make sure that you don't get this sort of star celebrity scientists at the expense of other communities that might not be able to compete in that old-fashioned sort of way. So yeah, looking forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nick. So I think, gosh, there's quite a broad range of things to be unpicking there, but I do think that one of the things that's sort of coming through for me is this question of culture, and that the role of culture in transformation and in creating an open world for individuals and institutions. You've all talked about policy and the importance, it sounds like the importance of policy and bringing that together, but in what ways do you think policy has a role in culture? How collaborative is policy making? So Nick, for example, you talked about all these different policies coming out of these institutions. Are you talking together? Are you talking globally? Are you looking at funders? I know, for example, you and I have spoken previously. You helped us with our open data policy with your experience, for which we were grateful. But my question, I guess, to all of you is the role of policy in change, how that can help with culture, and whether or not there's much collaboration in that. So should we start with you first, Nick, because you're still warm?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. So, where's me? You can probably still see my screen.
You can see your screen. I wouldn't worry too much. It's I think the third button down if you do want to stop sharing.
I can see how to pause it, but sorry, I'm trying to listen, and I can't multitatask at the best of times. But yeah, I think that there is some collaboration happening, but it does tend to be quite grassroots. So the UKRN is a good example. I mean, just before this, as part of our Open Access Week programme across the White Rose universities, so Leeds is in a consortium with Sheffield and York, and we've just had a reproducibility journal club just immediately prior to this. organised by the 3 clubs at those 3 universities, which tends to be run by early career researchers. But it does perhaps tend to be driven a little by enthusiasts, and I do sometimes worry, both within my own university and without, that it's a little bit of an echo chamber. We're not necessarily reaching the people we really need to. People that get it are doing it, and they're having the conversations, but I think we need to work out how to reach those that aren't perhaps engaging yet. And that's I think that the cultural discussions are part of that, and certainly at Leeds, and I know other universities are looking at rewards and incentive and that kind of thing, because that's what's going to work. Whether it's mandates on one hand, the sticks or the carrots on the other, to actually incentivize this type of behavior. So there is work ongoing, but still a lot more to do, I think.
Okay, Dany, I suspect you have views on this. Do you have anything to add to what Nick's been saying there?
Yeah, I'm thinking actually of something that now Emeritus Professor Tom Cochrane said. Now, he was one of the Deputy Vice Chancellors at the Queensland University of Technology, and did bring in that first institutional policy on open access across the university. He came out and spoke to us at Cambridge when I was there, and he talked about how initially these sort of open access advocates and people who thought open access was a good idea sort of assumed that it would be run on a disciplinary basis. And so we had Archive, which was a physics repository of long standing prior to technology allowing it to work in the way it does now. And you can see in the way DSpace, for example, is structured, the idea that it's built around these communities, and that it would be self-run in this sort of somehow utopian, gorgeous, wonderful world, which of course never worked. And so after that, he said it became clear that that was not going to happen. So that's why he brought in the institutional requirement for open access, thinking that, oh, well, other institutions will come on board, and they didn't. And he said, so now it's become a funder question, because the funders are saying, if we're investing all this money in this research, we want to be able to read the results of it. And so it becomes a top-down requirement policy. It's imposed upon people. And of course, the Wellcome Trust and the National Institutes of Health started at that same time. Around 2004, they brought in their policies. They said, oh, we'd like you to do this. And very few people did. And then they said, you must do it. And a few more people did it. And it wasn't until they said, if you do not do this, we won't give you any extra money, and we might not give you all of the money you were supposed to get in the first place. And suddenly the compliance went up. And so there's a lot of complaining about, oh, this is being forced upon us, and the Plan S discussions, how dare they, bring this upon us? And it's like, we weren't invited to the conversation. And I pushed back a lot when that happened, because I was quite cross by that stage. When Nick's talking about being in the space for 15 years, I accepted my stipend for my PhD, which was on open access, literally the day after I had my son. And his 18th birthday is next month. So that's how long I've been in this space. So my response to that was, you have been invited to these conversations. You've chosen to ignore them for the past 2 decades. And so how about we start talking now? So that's where I think policy needs to come in, because otherwise, if we sit around waiting for academics seriously to get their act together on something like this, it is not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, as working on the publisher side of the ecosystem, that's where, if I may say, the value that we can add in this space is because, there are these advocates, there are the enthusiasts, as Nick puts it, and I personally think those voices are vital to get change. They're the people you can never do enough for them. It's never good enough what you are, and you need those voices to continue the change and to really push you to always do better. But at the same time, because we're publishing globally, and in our space we're publishing a lot of unfunded authors and also quite disadvantaged authors, you really have to be building a system that can support all of those. So it's going fast enough for the enthusiasts, and it's bringing up these people behind who are really confused and not well supported, we find, in terms of, because they've not got funding, or they're not necessarily in a very privileged institution. And so for me, in my role, the challenge is how to satisfy one whilst bringing the other with you. And it isn't, I think policies do help, but it's that collaboration I personally like to see in the space a bit, because myriad different policies. I guess will iterate towards a best practice and standards over time, but we're in a messy space at the moment, aren't we, which makes it quite challenging. Sumit, did you have anything to add on this question of policy and culture and how it could help us get to an open world?
Sorry. So policy and culture has to go in together. They are interrelated. So if you have a good policy and the culture is not that good, then you will not be able to work in synchronization. So the policy and the culture has to be synchronized. And as ma'am said, that it took 2 decades, and here also it took a lot of time to discuss and open up on break the norm, the hashtag which we are running on Twitter for today's discussion. So here also that everything is under paywall. So whatever you want to read is under paywall. So if a culture and a policy has been made, that the research has to be made open to all, and at least to the young researchers. I am not saying that it should be given free to all, but it should be a policy that the research should be provided to at least free to all the students, to young researchers and the young research scholars of various universities working on the area that they require to have those papers. So we all have to work together in a policy or in a mechanism where NICSR is developing the statements from all the universities showing the universities are opening up. So that kind of thing, we are also trying to do that in India. And I have just read a question also on STIP. If somebody has asked that how much open the door is open. The door is opening up in India, but yes, it's not that easy also in India to have one nation and one subscription. It's a vast land with a huge population, and everybody cannot be given the free open access of all the journals around the world to those, because we cannot give everything to everybody. Somebody has to give in something which is related to him, the other body has to give in the other thing which is related to him. So not everything can make a full difference, but yes, this is a need of the hour, and the discussion should go on. And definitely, if we work together in synchronization, this will be the next new thing in research, is open access.
Great, thank you. We do actually have a couple of questions that have come in from attendees. I think the first one looks to me that it's for you, Dany. Kathy Foley, in her interview with Nature Index, spoke about a possibility for national open access deal. Are there any consultations in this direction happening? I don't know if you're aware of it.
There is some consultation that's going on. It's as far as I understand, the group that's been asked to sort of work with her on that, well, she's asked them to work with her on this consultation, have gone around and sort of spoken to different institutions and so on. If anybody is interested in contributing to that conversation, my understanding is that you can email the Office of Chief Scientist and put in your 2 cents worth. And my understanding is that Dr. Foley is quite open to listening, and she's actively listening to the contributions. So if people have got things they want to say, I think they should say them. I'm very interested that Sumit was saying that India is also looking to that solution. I think there are benefits to that solution. I think there are also problems, because the suggestion here in Australia is that the money that is spent on subscriptions not just from research institutions like universities, but also from areas like the Department of Health or the Department of Education and so on, like government departments, would be all pooled, and that money would be used. Now, the needs of those different areas are quite different from one another, and even the needs from one university to another, as you'd understand, Shelley, well, as a publisher who deals with many universities, is really varied. And so I think that there may be the one size fits all might be slightly problematic from that point of view. So I'd be looking forward to some more detail on that.
Great, hopefully that answered the question, but do pose more people if you want more clarification, but that sounds good, and do contact Kathy via her email. The next one I think is for you, Sumit, is how far in India has STIP 2020 opened the door for open access amidst the one nation, one subscription discussion? So it's a similar thing, this idea of a national deal.
Yeah, the things are opening up. We are ready for that, but I'm again telling that it's not possible for us to just go for it like that. It's a big country, a big population, and everybody should not read everything. So sciences should be given the approaches for the sciences, and the social sciences are given or should be given the papers of social sciences or the access. Everybody just cannot be given the whole open access, because they're not. It's not required for them. I do not need medical papers for me, and I do not need the papers which are unrelated to me. So they have to go like that. But yes, we are very, very positive on this approach of the government. And this government is a strong government, and I think they're gonna do something for that in academics. And we also have our new education policy. After decades long, we got our new education policy last year also. So that is also a change is there. And the last thing in this, which I always say, that we need to stay aware ourselves and the others of predatory journals also, because the concept of misuse, open access is misused by them. So a lot of predatory publishers are using the concept of open access. So usually they are open access in the start, and then after 1 or 2 years they turn predatory and start publishing multiple papers which are not even required and not even come to the purview. As a platinum open access editor of a journal, where we have a journal which is a platinum open access, and I believe in the concept of open access. You don't pay anything. You just have to send us a good paper. We will publish it, and anybody can download it. So that there is a wide visibility to the research, wide visibility to the journal, and wide visibility to the university as well as to the researchers, those who are publishing with us. So as an STP also, the door is opening, but it's not that, it's just the foot in the door, I would like to say, of open access.
Great, thanks, Sumit. We've actually had a question around open data as well. I suspect this is a good one for you to answer as well, Nick, and I have some thoughts too. Researchers are understandably concerned about their data in an OA environment. What advice do you give them?
Well, yeah, it's something we cover in our sort of basic training around, you know, the workshops that we run around research data, and it is difficult. But I mean, the first thing I would say is that what we're trying to advocate, certainly here at Leeds and I think elsewhere, is to regard data and other types of outputs as a first-class research object. And if you're publishing it with a DOI, with a persistent identifier in a repository, then you've got the precedence as you would with a journal article, you know. So I know people worry about getting scooped and that kind of thing. We can also accommodate embargoes and that kind of thing. You know, there's recognition from a lot of the councils, the research councils in the UK and elsewhere, I think, that the producers of data can have, you know, exclusive rights to work with that data in the first instance for, I don't know, a year, 2 years or whatever. So there are ways around that. And then, you know, this issue around, as I say, open versus fair data, I think that's something we're thinking about a lot, because we're always advocating open data, but that isn't always possible for very good reason, with especially with personal data or qualitative data. But it could still be fair. You know, it could be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So actually getting that nuance over is quite difficult. I mean, we have a facility here at Leeds to manage that type of data. The other repositories will manage that type of data, you know, based on end user agreements and this kind of thing. And that can cause challenges again on the disciplinary sense. So I'm going to a faculty meeting on Monday, for example, with the Leeds University Business School, who historically don't really engage so much with open research. They've got a lot of contractual obligations, they've got a lot of commercial research. So for them, there's additional challenges that may not pertain to other areas of the university. So I'm working with them on a data set at the moment. They've asked for, you know, our standard license would be CC BY, so Creative Commons attribution. On the data set I'm working with them at the moment, which actually prompted this discussion with the faculty on Monday, they've asked for CC BY, non-commercial, no derivatives. So I want to try to get to the bottom of why that is. We can give them that, but, you know, no derivatives, how does that's obviously problematic then for sharing data. So there's lots of nuance then to tease out. So, and then obviously when we're dealing with the echo culture echo chamber to actually get the discussion going in the first place, then to actually try and get to that nuance and really try and get to the nitty gritty of what the issues are for particular researchers and disciplines is even more of a challenge. Does that help?
Yes, I think so. And the person who posed that question said they agree fair opens a different door. So it sounds like that did help. Did Dany or Sumit have anything to add to that? If not, I'm happy to give the publisher perspective. So as a publisher in the applied social sciences and with a lot of unfunded authors, when we launched Emerald Open Research, we were really kind of going ahead of our market, as it were, ahead of our community. Nobody was asking us for open data at all. So there weren't that like advocates within our community asking for that, but we could see it happening elsewhere when we wanted to really not just follow but lead in the domains in which we are significant. And it's been a real eye-opener for us. Firstly, the guidance we were working with at the time had been really put together with STEM in mind, and that was quite confusing for a lot of our authors. So we had to work with various partners, including some people at the Centre for Open Science, and Nick, for example, very kindly reviewed our guidance for us in order to make it more discipline specific, give really tangible examples to people about what data might look like within the social sciences. I really like the mantra, as open as possible and as closed as necessary. I think that's a really important way to show people that it's not asking you to name your participants or to give personal identified information. But I do think that one of the biggest things that barriers that we face as a publisher in the support of our authors is that at the moment we're in the position where they are largely unfunded, that we're the first person to ask them about their data. So they will come to us with their research and we will say, you know, do you have your data? Would you like to make it available? And they haven't thought about it at all to that point, which is completely understandable. And then to reverse engineer that data, if they haven't thought about sharing it at the beginning of their research journey, that's actually very difficult to do. And so we have to give quite a lot of support around that. A lot of them aren't aware of repositories and institutions. And I do remember one academic telling me, I've worked on that data for 8 years. That's mine, and I'm not going to jeopardize my career to make that openly available, which comes back again to culture and incentives, doesn't it, around you know, what reward does she get for making that open, and also what the competitive nature of academia can be in some quarters instead of the collaborative. But Dany, you raised your hand. You've got something to say as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make, and something that you encounter quite a lot when you talk to people about data. It becomes a very personal and very emotional conversation quite quickly. And I think that what that speaks to is when we're talking about open access to journal articles or monographs for that matter, we are talking about a defined item. We're talking about something that we all know what it is. It's already in the public domain. It's about breaking down the access barrier, and that's the issue. Whereas when we're talking about data, it's much more fluid. And so when we say we want you to share data, what do we mean? Do we mean the whole lot? Do we mean the mouse if we're talking about biology? Or is it just the information that will support the claims made in the paper, and so on and so forth? And so it's very, it's hard to even pinpoint what it is you're even asking people for. And you're assuming then they have collected it in some form that can actually be extracted, and so on and so forth, the stuff that you were describing. But that emotional concept that this is my data and I'm not going to share it, that comes back to that question of I'm hoping to get, you know, write a few papers out of this, or write a chapter of a book out of this. And if I release it out to the public, somebody else will scoop me and I will lose the, because you don't get any value at the moment for a data set, but you do get value for publishing an article. So that comes back to the reward problem. And if we don't start rewarding the sharing of data in some tangible manner, then there's very little incentive to do so.
I think as well, some of the anxiety I hear is that not being allowed to fail, that you spoke about at the beginning, Dany, sort of acknowledging failure and being okay with that. People finding that if they do, you know, they're worried. Obviously, there's a reproducibility crisis if they make their data available and somebody finds something that they didn't see and it's an honest mistake, or it's not wrong but someone's misunderstood it or misused it and got a different result. What that means for them in their career, it's a scary thing, isn't it? And that's not something to play with lightly. So again, comes back to culture, doesn't it, and how collaborative and supportive it is. I'm not sure where we've lost Nick, but we still do have a few.
I'm still here, Shelley. Connection. Can you hear me? I'm on EduRoam at the university. I can't get a wire connection in my laptop. So I've just turned my camera off.
Whilst I was really struck as well with what Sumit was saying in his talk about predatory publishing and that being a barrier. One of the questions I did have around this, because I've been starting to hear predatory publishing has obviously been around for a while. It seemed to, with various different whitelists and, you know, Beals lists and things like that, and the UKSG's Think, Check, Submit, it seemed to me that people were learning more about this. But I have been hearing much more anxiety around predatory publishing in the last year or so, and in my experiences in particular regions. So I was just wondering, from the perspective of you, Sumit, and also maybe Dany and Nick, with predatory journals, is this a global issue, or is it more of a problem in some regions than others, do you think? And if it's, what can we do about it? That's quite a big question, but maybe one or two things that you think would help, particularly actually if you think there's things publishers could do as well. So if you go first, Sumit. Do you think it's a global problem, or is it more regionally focused?
So when I was researching, and we have a couple of data with us, it's now reaching the parts of Europe. It's a big problem in Asia. It's an Asia-centric problem, you can say. At present, the Asian countries are trapped by these predatory publishers, but yes, it is also reaching to some of the parts of the Europe as well. So I haven't seen any of the research papers from the sides of the continents of America and from your side that they are into the predatory, but yes, in Asia it's a very big problem. Now, why it is a big problem? Because you get a good job in teaching or in research, you need to publish with some database agencies where the indexing are being done. Is elsewhere by the Scopus and Clarivate is Web of Science, and ABDC is for management journals. So as and when they do these indexing of the journals, then journals become very high. So they ranked very high once they are into the indexes, and you want to publish with them to go high in your research. But then they miss you of this concept that they give you early publication in 24 hours and 48 hours, and they will ask you some money and the publication will be done. So this is now in Asia, but it is now going into Europe, and it might come to other countries also, because we need to have the checks and balances. Because everywhere we are thinking that research is going to be a good research, but at the end of the day, when we go into the retraction watch and we see some of the good papers, they have been cited by thousands of times, but at the end of the day, they are retracted because of plagiarism or falsified or fabricated data in that, which the editors couldn't catch, which the reviewers couldn't catch, and the author, you just cannot say the author is wrong, because the reviewer also crossed it, and it also crossed the stage of editor-in-chief also. So that is a point that this problem is now coming up in a higher order. And then why I'm saying again is they misuse the concept of open access while taking high number of APC from them. So the concept of APC, which is there to run a journal, but they misuse that concept that everywhere you have to pay, please pay to us also. But at the end of the day, they are predatory.
Thanks, Sumit. Dany, did you have anything to say on the issue of predatory journals at all?
I think that we need to be careful of the rhetoric that sometimes sits around predatory journals, and that somebody would be, it's silly that they get caught out, for example, and that it's somehow naivety or whatever. This is very sophisticated, and Sumit's demonstration of some of the some of the examples where you look at that and it looks quite legitimate at first glance. This is not a matter of people being stupid. There is a huge amount of incentive to publish, and publish fast, and publish often, and so a path of least resistance can be attractive. And so I think that we've got a problem. One of the reasons why predatory journals have been able to flourish is because of our incentive and reward system. And so the problem is not so much the predatory publishers, although they are a problem. I think it's actually, we need to be thinking about why people are being entrapped in this sort of space when we are talking about generally very intelligent people. So I think it's really a more of an ecosystem problem than specifically a predatory journal problem.
I think what struck me about Sumit's presentation as well was just how many different checks and different ways that an author could get caught out, and the emphasis being on them to recognise this within a system that is not their bread and butter and is not where their main focus is. So it must be incredibly stressful and difficult. We've got 1 minute left. Nick, did you have anything you wanted to say on predatory journals at all before we sort of maybe move to wrap up? Or
Not really, just to echo what Dany was saying, really. I mean, the fact is it's lucrative. You know, I mean, I think that's a big factor. If there's a lot of money in scholarly publishing, you know, and that's a whole other discussion. Personally, I quite like getting these things because they always promote me to doctor or even professor sometimes. So, you know, that's good for the ego, but no.
Same here. I always wonder why they want my paper so much. I'm not actually, don't have the honour of being a published author, so I wouldn't start with me. Great, well, thank you everybody. Thank you to our panellists for joining us today. I'm incredibly grateful to you for your time, particularly Dany, where it is the evening in Australia, so thank you so much. I was going to ask you for your final thoughts, but we've run out of time. So for those of you that asked a question that we didn't get back to, we will be coming back to you afterwards to answer that as best we can. If you enjoyed this webinar, you can head to the podcast page of Emerald's website and you can find further discussions from leading voices about the transition to open. I hope you're all having a great OA week, and I definitely look forward to continuing this conversation in future panels and in future webinars. So again, thank you for attending, and thank you to our panellists. Goodbye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.